What happens when the U.S. government quietly gives the green light to devices that mimic the firepower of machine guns, weapons outlawed since the 1930s? In a fiery Senate showdown, Senator Jack Reed confronted Attorney General Pam Bondi over a stunning Justice Department decision that critics say opens the floodgates to weapons capable of unleashing 30 rounds in just 4 seconds. Reed demanded answers about how this move protects Americans, while Bondi deflected with legal technicalities and border talking points. What played out wasn't just a debate over gun policy. It exposed deep contradictions in how federal law enforcement is approaching public safety.
Where you can dispose of an entire 30-round magazine in about 4 seconds, so it is a fully automatic weapon. In the press release announcing the settlement, you are quoted as saying the settlement, quote, will enhance public safety. How does putting more automatic weapons, which have been against the law since the 1930s, enhance public safety?
Thank you for that question, Senator Reed. What that will do, it will enhance public safety by settling the litigation, because it is a guarantee that the manufacturer will not put that in handguns. We settled those cases because it was the right decision under the law. Nothing's comical about this. These devices are materially the same as bump stocks. The Supreme Court said last year that they are not machine guns under federal law. We followed the law. We will continue to follow the law. I'm a career prosecutor. I'm going to do everything in my power to keep Americans safe. What we should be concerned about up here are all the illegal guns flowing into our country by illegal aliens who have been free to walk into our country over the past 4 years. And we have taken thousands of those guns off of the street, including drugs, and including violent criminals.
Excuse me. How can you go ahead and say we're more safe today because they will not put these automatic firing devices in pistols, which have magazines of about maybe 20 rounds at most, or maybe 10, and have a range much less than an automatic weapon? Have you ever fired an automatic weapon?
I have.
Well, you understand then that that's a device that was designed to kill people. It's not a hunting rifle. It's not a target rifle. It's mass fire. And you made a compromise saying, well, don't put them in pistols, but you can go ahead and put them out in automatic weapons.
We followed the law. We will continue to follow the law. You and I clearly disagree on the Second Amendment.
Well, I agree that machine guns are not appropriate in the United States, and since 1930 or so, we've outlawed machine guns. And these semi-automatic weapons that are produced in volume are so easily converted to automatic weapons that it's you're ignoring the reality, frankly.
I'm following the law, Senator.
Well, yes, that's right. By the way, how many American weapons are going to Mexico in a year? What are we doing to stop American weapons going to Mexico to arm their gangs?
Well, we need to support that on both sides.
Well, what are you
doing?
What are you doing to support it on our side?
We are arresting people who have illegal firearms in our country. We're not sending people back to Mexico with guns. We're throwing them in our jails and prosecuting them.
You're allowing them to be purchased in the United States and driven across the border. Most of these gangs have completely turned themselves into military organizations because they're using American weapons, American technology, and your argument is that, well, we're not doing anything about then.
No, not my argument. That was the policy of the last 4 years of the Biden administration with open borders. You could come back and forth across our borders. You could buy guns. You could take guns off the street. You could shoot people in our country. You could bring fentanyl into our country. You could bring methamphetamine into our country. You could bring cocaine into our country. That was the previous administration.
No,
not this
What
one.
are you doing to stop the flow of weapons into Mexico?
We are arresting flow of weapons into. Our borders are closed. We are arresting illegal cartels. Sinaloa from Mexico, MS-13 from El Salvador, TDA. We are arresting from Venezuela, ATF has seized over 14,600 guns since Donald Trump has been president. That's a 33% increase from the last administration. And think about that. That's with our borders secure.
Were they coming into
so they weren't doing anything.
Were they coming into the United States?
Our borders are closed. They're not coming in or out of the United States now across Mexico. We've done a 33% increase in firearm seizures. Think about that. Think about that, Senator, from the last administration. 33% increase. And our borders are closed. So we're getting all these guns off the streets that came into our country. And I'm so proud of the work of the men and women in law enforcement.
I don't think you've done anything to severely interrupt the arming of Mexican gangs. Because that's really not what your focus, and I think your focus should be on that. But thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And can I just add one thing? And
no,
because the borders are closed, we are stopping the guns from going to Mexico.
Well, let me ask you another question. If the borders are closed, why do we have a division headquarters of the United States Army in Fort Huachuca and military elements across the board when the borders close and Border Patrol can handle it?
As former military, I would think you would know the answer to that, to keep Americans safe.
No, I think it's to promote the president's policies on the border, and the readiness of our forces is suffering as a result. Thank you.
Senator Britt.
Politics and national security, and the consequences may be far bigger than anyone admits. It all began with the Department of Justice's announcement that it was dropping litigation against forced reset triggers, or FRTs. These are small but highly controversial devices that, once installed on a rifle like an AR-15, allow it to fire at a speed nearly identical to a fully automatic weapon. To put that in perspective, a 30-round magazine can be emptied in about 4 seconds. Demonstrations online have shown how easily these devices replicate machine gun fire, despite long-standing laws that have outlawed automatic weapons for nearly a century. Senator Jack Reed wasted no time pointing out this reality. To him, the danger was clear. These are not tools for sport, not for hunting, not for home defense. They are designed for mass fire. Attorney General Bondi, however, defended the settlement. She argued that by narrowing the device's use, specifically ensuring they are not placed in pistols, the Justice Department had reached a pragmatic decision. She leaned heavily on the Supreme Court's recent ruling that bump stocks are not considered machine guns under federal law, using that precedent as her shield. To her, the settlement was not only lawful but necessary, a way of following the letter of the law even if the spirit of public safety seemed less certain. She emphasized her background as a career prosecutor, assuring senators that she remained committed to protecting Americans. But Reed wasn't convinced, and his questions cut straight to the heart of the matter. If a device can mimic a machine gun, how does its legalization make anyone safer? As the exchange heated up, Reed pressed Bondi on whether she had ever fired an automatic weapon. She said she had. Then he delivered the line that framed the entire debate. Automatic weapons were designed to kill people, not to hunt, not to target shoot, but to unleash continuous deadly fire. He accused her of making a compromise that put the public at risk, allowing manufacturers to keep selling forced reset triggers as long as they weren't attached to pistols. To Reed, this wasn't a compromise at all. It was a concession that opened a dangerous loophole in America's firearms policy. But just as the conversation seemed ready to drill deeper into the threat of these devices, Bondi abruptly shifted focus. Rather than grappling with the public safety concerns, she redirected the spotlight to immigration and border security. According to her, the real danger wasn't forced reset triggers but the alleged flood of illegal aliens bringing guns and drugs into the country under Biden's so-called open borders. She contrasted that with what she described as Trump's tougher approach, claiming the borders were now closed and citing numbers over 14,000 guns seized since his presidency, a 33% increase from the previous administration. To Bondi, these statistics were proof that law enforcement was succeeding. To Reed, they were a smokescreen. The senator pointed out the glaring contradiction in her argument. If the borders were truly closed, why was the United States maintaining such a heavy military presence along the southern border, including an entire division headquarters and regular troop rotations? If Border Patrol alone could handle the situation, why deploy the Army? Reid pressed for clarity, but once again Bondi doubled down, saying the deployments were necessary to keep Americans safe. At one point she even took a swipe at Reid's military background, suggesting he should already know the answer. But the deflection only made the contradiction sharper. Throughout the hearing, Reid kept bringing the focus back to the central issue: American weapons flowing south into Mexico. Cartels were not just gangs anymore, he argued. They were transforming into paramilitary organizations, outfitted with U.S.-made guns and U.S.-born technology. These weapons weren't staying on American streets. They were crossing borders, fueling violence, destabilizing communities, and empowering organized crime across Latin America. And yet, Reid insisted, the DOJ had offered no serious plan to stop this cross-border arms pipeline. For him, Bondi's talking points about border security didn't answer the urgent question of how American-made firearms were ending up in the hands of cartels in the first place. Bondi clung to her narrative. She praised law enforcement for their work, repeated that borders were closed, and highlighted cartel arrests. But her answers didn't match the concerns raised. While she framed the settlement as a narrow legal decision and pointed to numbers that sounded impressive, she failed to grapple with the bigger picture: that U.S. weapons, including those modified by forced reset triggers, were flowing unchecked into criminal networks. Her rhetoric may have satisfied partisan audiences, but it left the larger public safety threat glaringly unresolved. By the end of the hearing, the exchange had become more than just a policy disagreement. It was a revealing snapshot of the priorities shaping federal law enforcement. On one side was a senator demanding evidence-based answers, warning of the real-world consequences of policy decisions. On the other was an attorney general falling back on legal technicalities, partisan rhetoric, and evasions. The tension highlighted a troubling reality: that when politics takes precedence over security, the people left most vulnerable are ordinary Americans. Reid's arguments resonated because they were grounded in facts. He pointed to demonstrations of forced reset triggers, exposed the loopholes, and warned of the downstream consequences. Bondi, in contrast, leaned on broad talking points about immigration, the Second Amendment, and statistics that sounded reassuring but left key questions unanswered. The contrast between the two wasn't just political, it was philosophical. One side sought accountability, the other sought to protect a narrative. The deeper danger, however, goes beyond the Senate floor. This debate shines a light on how quickly weapons technology, legal loopholes, and political agendas can collide. When forced reset triggers are effectively sanctioned for civilian use, the line between regulated firearms and battlefield weapons begins to blur. When U.S.-made weapons flow into Mexico unchecked, the violence doesn't stay across the border, it circles back, feeding organized crime and destabilizing communities on both sides. And when leaders deflect instead of addressing those dangers, accountability disappears. That's why this hearing matters. It isn't just about whether forced reset triggers are legal or illegal, it's about what kind of country we want to live in. A country where public safety is prioritized, or one where partisan politics determines who gets to wield machine gun-like firepower. Reid's questions put a spotlight on that choice, and Bondi's evasions showed just how far the Justice Department under Trump is willing to go to preserve a political line, even when it conflicts with basic safety. And here's the chilling truth: when leadership at the highest levels refuses to confront reality, the cost is paid not in headlines but in lives. Families, communities, and law enforcement officers will face the consequences of decisions made in Washington. The question is whether enough people are paying attention before the damage becomes irreversible. So ask yourself this: when politicians argue over technicalities while weapons of war slip through the cracks, who really benefits? Certainly not the average citizen, not the families trying to stay safe, not the officers risking their lives on the street. The winners are the cartels, the criminals, and the special interests who thrive in loopholes and legal gray zones. This Senate clash was more than a heated debate. It was a warning that when politics trumps truth, Americans are left unprotected. If you want to keep digging into the stories that those in power would rather distract you from, make sure you hit like, share this video, and subscribe. Stay vigilant, because the fight for truth, justice, and accountability is far from over.